Oh, look at you. Well, you just stumbled upon something interesting now, didn't you? At 1-800-449-8255. Why, it's the Clark the Shark Show. And I'm going to talk about one of my favorite bands. Oh, a three-piece band, baby, but they're more like a seven-piece when you see them or anytime you hear them. It's not like this is three guys, but it is. Oh, baby, it's digital, it's mechanical, it's modern, it's poetic, it's robotic, it's technical, it's Rush. And it's the Clark the Shark Show from the Golden EIB Sharkraphone, where I'm going to talk about Rush signals. You know, I don't want to talk about those Rush albums that we all know. You know, the ones 2112, Moving Pictures, and Permanent Waves, and Fleetwood Mac, and Led Zeppelin, and AC/DC, and Foreigner. I mean, a lot of bands, I might review Steely Dan, but there's just a lot of stuff, like Tom Petty and Stevie Nicks, and that I'm probably not going to review much of here on the Clark the Shark Show. For me, Clark the Shark, it's got to be really interesting, and it's almost got to be like Failure. Beautiful technical failure. I mean, albums that were meant to sell 10 million, but they only sold 1 million. Like The Who, Quadrophenia, or Captain Beyond, and Rush, Signals. Now, this album, back in the day when we were all listening to Rush when we were 18, in 1983, these guys were really big before my time, and not big, but like big in terms of technicality and musicianship. When I was just, 13 in 1978, I heard people talking about Rush, and I was like, man, I want to hear that Rush, whatever they are. Sounds interesting. At 1-800-449-8255, the Clark the Shark Show. And of course, eventually I would get into Rush, and I would go see these guys in concert many, 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 many times. I've probably seen Rush live like 21 times at the Forum in Inglewood, quite a few times, and other places, Irvine Meadows, San Diego. Man, I've seen some Rush in my day, and I'm really not the world's biggest Rush head. I mean, I know some people really, really, really into Rush, and I'm not really one of those, but, those are level 10 Rush heads. I'm like a level 8. I definitely know all about Rush and their story, how they come from, Toronto or up in Canada or wherever, and they were all into The Who, and that kind of made me interested in Rush, to know that these guys all loved The Who. Neil Peart, he loved Keith Moon, and Geddy Lee loved John Entwistle, and, Alex Lifeson pretty much patterned himself after Pete Townsend. And these guys loved The Who, but they probably, loved Led Zeppelin and Sabbath and you name it, Geddy loved Yes and ELP, and I'm sure these guys loved Captain Beyond, etc., etc. I mean, I know they loved Genesis with Peter Gabriel, and probably even after Peter Gabriel. But this album, Signals, is where Rush begins to lose it. Now, before this album, these guys were on a roll. They had about 6 albums in a row that were just awesome. And this is the first album where you were kind of like, what is this? You still liked it, you were still like, well, it's cool, it's good, it's Rush, but you were a little suspect of, what are these guys doing? Suddenly there was a lot less guitar, a lot more keyboards, a lot more production. It was more technical and robotic and atmospheric than Rush had ever been before. This album was really interesting to me, Clark the Shark, but even I was a little suspicious of Rush. And of course, the next album after this would be Grace Under Pressure, which is an album that I, Clark the Shark, really love. And even way back then in the 80s, I remember going to the Laserium and, seeing, I liked it when Rush kind of got lame and they got more keyboardsy and more artsy fartsy technical and almost like 80s disco, like electronic. I don't know what it was. It was like technical disco emo, robotic ecstasy, Rush. It was just really weird. Progressive rock. This album signals Grace Under Pressure and, of course, Power Windows. I like all these albums a lot. I really do. They're more interesting to me than Moving Pictures, even though that is incredible. And Permanent Waves and Hemispheres. Incredible. Farewell to Kings. I love it. I love that. Clark the Shark. Now, where I draw the line is probably like Presto. Roll the Bones was a big comeback, I remember, in like 1991 or whenever that was. But there were a couple albums there that I was just like, I think, Hold Your Fire, that Red album, and Presto. I was like, what are these guys doing? It was still interesting, though. I was still very interested in Rush. I was interested enough to go see them live. But there was a period there where I never saw Rush anymore in concert. I saw these guys on the Power Windows tour, 1986. And then I never saw them again till I don't think I saw them on Roll the Bones, I saw them with my nephew Hagen at the Forum for like Counterparts and Test for Echo. It was a while before I saw some Rush again. There was a little period where even Clark the Shark was turned off by the technical electronic disco prog rock digital shit they were doing. It was just too weird or something. But I always, even through those times, I still appreciated Rush. And I would put in one of their cassettes or CDs and listen to it. And it was a guilty pleasure, I tell you. But this album here, Signals, is it's a good Rush album. They're starting to change. They're trying new things. They're trying to be different. They're trying to be weird. They're really trying to break out of that typical Rush hard rock, heavy metal, whatever it was, that rock and roll Rush thing. And on this album, they are in the direction of Grace Under Pressure here. It's very keyboardsy, and Lifeson's guitar is way turned down and toned down, but you can still hear it. It still sounds good. There were a lot of critics that said, Rush Signals, they're trying to get rid of Lifeson and his guitar, but that's not true. He's very much all over this album, and this very much is a great Rush album. I like it. It should get 5 stars. I don't think it will. Oh, look at that. It gets 2. 3. There's a 4-star. For who gave it that? All Music? Of course. Rolling Stone gives it 2 stars. I mean, what does Rolling Stone even know? Subdivisions. You gotta love that song, man. And the Analog Kid. Good rock and roll guitar work by Alex Lifeson. The keyboards on Subdivisions sounds gloomy, like doomy electronic doom, and then the Analog Kid kind of snaps it back to some rock and roll. I love the Analog Kid. Chemistry Interesting song. Uh, a little modern, little technical, little, you know, I'm interested in it though. It's definitely a step towards Grace Under Pressure chemistry. But Digital Man, I love that song. Cool. Rush are three robots going into the future, and they strap on this electronic tinfoil hat, and they're like reading the mind of the atmosphere, of the gods, of the electronic gods. And Rush are just up there in the sky, flying on a silver jet craft. And they're just three digital men. The drumming on this album, by the way, is amazing by Neil Peart. And The Weapon, part one of, or part two of Fear. Interesting song, The Weapon. I like it. And of course, a real big Rush radio favorite, New World Man. All three of the guys are really playing on New World Man. I love it. Great song. I love the drumming by Peart. Neil Peart is one of my favorite drummers. Him and Keith Moon and Bobby Caldwell and Ian Pace. But of course, you gotta love Neil Peart, not just for his drumming, but his poetry and his vision, his words. They're just such a contrast, clash to the electronic digital chemistry of Geddy Lee, and just the guitar that's noodling in there from Alex. Rush are just, they're trying new things all the time, and they're just, eventually as they get into the 80s, they get deep into 80s keyboards technology, and they actually start to fall behind and sound dated or something near the end of the 80s. It's like, it's so much keyboards and it's so much digital technology from these three New World men. That just you and me both, Clark the Shark, we began losing it. Losing It is like the song where Rush starts to lose it or something. And it happens on this album. But Countdown, where they're talking about the space shuttle and NASA, and it's real nerdy. The three guys in the Reverse Engineers down in Florida, they had to love Countdown, and they had to have loved this album by Rush, Signals. I really appreciate all 8 of these digital, technological, robotic, metallic songs full of chemistry. They're just so analog and subdivided, in the backs of cars, in the shopping malls. Subdivisions, baby. Rush, Neil Peart with the lyrics, and Geddy. Yeah, Geddy, you could tell he had a hard life when he was a kid. People didn't like him. And he threw his life into his bass playing and his singing and his music. He just threw everything into his music, just like Clark the Shark at 1-800-449-8255 on the Clark the Shark Show from the golden EIB Sharkraphone. You can tell that Rush, they wanted to play rock and roll, but on this album, they wanted to go into the future. They wanted to go digital. They wanted to go robotic. They wanted to be this band even more lame and stupid than like Mr. Roboto by Styx. I mean, Rush are just like, they just want to try anything that's just weird and completely lame. I mean, just horrible. And that is that album right here, Rush, Signals, at 1-800-449-8255. But I love this album, and I love Rush, one of my favorite bands of all time. I've seen these guys in concert so many times, and I can't believe how these guys pull off sounding exactly like their albums. They never make mistakes. I love Neil Peart's drumming. I could never drum like that. Just all the electronic drums and just millions of cymbals and splash cymbals and China Boy cymbals and rack toms and floor toms that are tuned down and the double bass playing. I mean, he's really awesome. You gotta love Neil Peart. He's one of the biggest influences, drumming wise upon Clark the Shark. But, I could never play. Everyone in the South Bay and Los Angeles, they just think I'm the greatest on drums. And now they're starting to say Clark's the greatest on everything. I mean, look what happens when you just see a video or two. I got guys who don't even know me that they claim they know me in the South Bay and they love me. Everyone down there now is like, oh, we all love Clark the Shark. He was such a genius. He was one of those guys into Rush. The truth is no one gave a flying fuck about me until they saw all my videos on the internet. And now they're all suddenly Clark the Shark experts. Everybody, all the punkers in North Redondo and Hermosa Beach and, Lomita, Long Beach, Torrance, Palos Verdes. Everybody knows Clark the Shark now, baby. Everybody claims they jammed with me, and maybe they did. I don't even remember, man. I played with so many bands. Jeez Louise, you guys. I mean, I probably did jam with you. I don't even know. But let me tell you, I definitely jammed along in my headphones many a times with Rush. And especially in particular, this album, Rush Signals, from 1982, when I was 17 years old at South High. I was a confused kid, I listened to The Clash and I listened to Joy Division and then I listened to Rush. I was really one mixed up, fucked up dude. And in the middle of all that, I listened to punk, and I had to listen to metal and everything, and then my dad, every night I'd come home and my dad was playing country like Elvis and Patsy Cline, and Clark the Shark just listened to everything. Roy Orbison. I mean, you name it, in a lot of weird ways. I'm just like Geddy Lee, and Neil Peart and Alex. I listen to all kinds of a variety and diversity of weird shit. And that's how I think GE, the Greenhouse Effect, is so weird. And we're not a part of the punk scene. We're not a part of the metal scene. We're not a part of anything. We're not a part of jazz. We're not a part of blues. We're a lot like Rush. We're just a part of nothing. We're totally independent, and we do our own thing on the Clark the Shark Show at 1-800-449-8255. But young people today who were born in 1999 and you're 24 years old in 2023, if you're listening to Clark the Shark right now from Torrance, from the Greenhouse Effect, I'm going to tell you guys, go get into all the albums by Rush, not just everything up to Signals. I want you guys to go listen to Grace Under Pressure and Power Windows and check those albums out. Just for the way Rush were trying to go keyboardsy and get modern in the 80s and move with the technology. It's so amazing. And you might even think it's lame and they suck. But that's all part of it, man. That's all part of life. I mean, we all go through phases. At 1-800-449-8255, the fabulous, amazing Clark the Shark Show, where you really just got the only review of Rush Signals that you will ever need.